And I think this speech, from what I can tell so far, has gone down very well. It was a very broad-ranging speech, covered many, many issues. But Mr. Obama has an ability, because of his heritage, his Kenyan father, to reach out and speak to Africans in a way that I think most foreign leaders would find very difficult. There are very few barriers for Mr. Obama in his conversation that he's trying to initiate with Africans. And I think that this speech will have ticked many, many boxes.
But Andrew, I mean, if you compare his visit, however, to 1998 when Bill Clinton went, completely mobbed, wasn't he? About 500,000 Ghanaians turned up to see him. I mean, this is a very kind of constrained, restrained visit by Barack Obama. I mean, the weather, obviously, the heavy rain makes it difficult for him to meet the crowds. But there's a bit of a distance. People aren't really getting that close to him. They're just sort of seeing him on TV in Ghana, practically, aren't they?
That's true, and there's a lot of frustration about that. The crowds are much smaller, people are very excited, but I just met a man from Togo who said, look, I came here hoping to catch a glimpse of Mr. Obama. Where is he? People do refer back to that '98 visit when Bill Clinton, just down the road from here, actually spoke to a crowd perhaps of 500,000, maybe more. His security were rather alarmed by the experience, and we're not sure whether it's because of security concerns or the weather or why exactly Mr. Obama isn't going to get to meet more people. But I think one has to look at the context of his visit. This is not the start of a grand tour of Africa. This is Mr. Obama trying to link Africa into the international community, and he mentioned that right at the beginning of his speech. He said, I see Africa as a fundamental part of our connected world. In other words, he doesn't have to come here and make large, long trips to multiple capitals. He can pop in the same way he popped into Rome and to Moscow and try and make Africa feel that it's not a special case and must not be treated on the sidelines constantly.
All right, and Andrew, tell us what else the first family are going to be doing in Ghana. There's a visit, isn't there, to that 400-year-old Cape Coast slave castle where millions of West African slaves were shipped to the Americas.
Exactly, that's, we understand, next on the agenda. Weather permitting, he'll fly by helicopter down the coast to this old fort where so many Africans were in horrendous conditions taken to the plantations of America. And it's interesting, actually, the local press here has decided, I think rather unilaterally, to adopt Michelle Obama as a Ghanaian. Her ancestry, her great-great-grandfather did come as a slave from West Africa, but the Ghanaians have decided that she definitely came from Ghana, and we hear that there may be ceremonies to bolster that fact or that claim at Cape Coast.
OK, Andrew Harding live there on the line from Accra, thanks very much. Well, let's go to Washington now and speak to Whitney Schneidman, who's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs during the Clinton administration. He was also an Africa advisor on the Obama campaign. Whitney Schneidman. Now, Barack Obama was generous enough to say he wanted to build on the strong efforts by President Bush, George Bush, who spent a great deal of money on HIV, AIDS, malaria and TB in Africa. Now, putting all the rhetoric aside, Barack Obama is going to have to make sure, isn't he, if he wants to maintain the goodwill of people, that he does actually deliver and doesn't just say the right thing and press the right buttons.
That's right. He was generous to acknowledge the accomplishments of the Bush administration, but there's something deeper going on, and that is, I think it really started with President Clinton and the passage of the African Growth and Opportunity Act in the year 2000, and that created a bipartisan consensus in Congress that it was in the U.S. interest to invest resources in Africa. And President Bush extended that to pass the $15 billion PEPFAR program and to create the Millennium Challenge account. And now it's President Obama's turn to take that bipartisan consensus and extend it even further. And in one area, such as food and agriculture, which he referred to in his speech, he's going to need help from Congress to lower tariffs and duties on cotton, on sugar, on groundnuts, products produced in Africa that need to find their way to the global market and to find their way to the American market for those promises to really come true.
But a big problem for Barack Obama, isn't there? Because he's got the credit crunch, of course. America doesn't have a great deal of surplus money. He's got all those domestic problems, and in foreign affair terms, He's got Afghanistan and still Iraq, where he's got 130,000 American troops still there. So what can he realistically do for Africa? His hands are tied.
Well, I wouldn't say they're tied. I mean, this is the mark of statesmanship, isn't it? And I think this president in his first 6 months has shown himself to be up to the task. And I think we have to keep in mind that this visit, this speech was his first. And we have 3.5 more years of this administration and hopefully another 4 years. And I think during that time, you will see President Obama moving forward in the 4 areas that he just outlined: economic opportunity,
sure,
health and conflict resolution, and take a holistic approach to Africa that we have not seen. He's got some very talented people working for him. He's got the support of Congress, and I think he will be able to deliver in partnership with African governments and African civil society leaders and business.
All right, Bonnie Greer, though, as Jendai Fraser, who was George Bush's chief person at the State Department on Africa, has said, look, let's not forget that Barack Obama is essentially an American president who will advance American interests. Now, is everybody getting carried away with all this Obama mania in Ghana and he's a son of the soil and so on? Fundamentally, he is an American president.
Well, what he's doing is refocusing another image of Africa. African immigrants are the most highly educated group of immigrants in the United States. African Americans are equipped to be able to now look at a new triangularity, which is what he's talking about. Africa's governance, all the issues of Africa are important to the United States. And also, for instance, I'm deputy chair at the British Museum, and we're doing the same thing in cultural institutions to come together to make a new deal for Africa, which will benefit the United States in the long run.
Okay, well, all my guests do stay with us because I'm going to chat to you a bit more. But first of all, let's just hear what people have been saying about Barack Obama. Our correspondents have been finding out how people in Nigeria, Kenya, where his father came from, and South Africa are actually reacting to Barack Obama's visit and what they think it will mean for them.
President Obama's decision not to visit Nigeria has provoked sharp debate inside the country. Opposition politicians see it as America's judgment on the health of Nigeria's democracy. This country suffers from widespread corruption. Recent elections here have been condemned as rigged. People that we spoke to here on the streets of Lagos were divided over the decision to stay away.
I don't think Obama should have come to Nigeria. I think Ghana was like the best place he could have gone to, because right now in Nigeria we're having problems with corruption, we're having problems with our leadership because of the infallible electoral process we have.
I think it's a pity he did not visit Nigeria as the only choice, because for whatever reason, Nigeria should be seen as the country through which the rest of the world would see and understand Africa.
People in this country fought for years to rid themselves of military rule. But nowadays, lots of them don't even bother to vote because the culture of bribery and election rigging is so strong. And it seems that President Obama has forced Nigerians to look inwards at themselves and at society. And it is clear that for many of them, they don't much like what they see.
Barack Obama is adored here in Kenya, the land of his late father's birth. There was a general assumption that Kenya would be his first port of call here in sub-Saharan Africa. But how have Kenyans taken to the president's decision to visit Ghana instead?
In many ways, it's making a statement about what this government really needs to do. I think he's made himself clear through the years that he's not the kind of person who would want to attach himself with vices or corruption or a system which doesn't really seem to work.
It definitely is a snub, but again, I cannot blame him. If I were in his shoes, I probably would have done the same, because he needs to send a strong message and he doesn't need to pretend about this. He doesn't like the way things are going in Africa, and I hope that's a strong message for Africa and Kenya especially.
Despite Kenya being the regional powerhouse and an important strategic ally for the West, Kenyans will have to wait a little longer to host a homecoming party for a president they claim as their own.
Even though President Barack Obama will not be coming to South Africa, people here in Johannesburg are optimistic about his visit to Ghana.
I think it's just a good thing he's touching base with his African roots. And I think also he chose Ghana instead of Kenya because of the stability in Ghana.
He's visiting Ghana, but I don't think it does anything to solve Africa's problems. But though it's a good thing, maybe it's good for him to come back to his roots.
I think that it's all right for him to come to Africa because there are a lot of problems, especially in my country, in Zimbabwe. They have to solve that thing. Because Zimbabwean people are many here. They left home, people are dying, there's a lot of things that is happening.